It was a windless night in the Carpathian forest, the kind of stillness that presses against your chest when a faint crackling jolted me from my thoughts. My old radio, switched off, humming to life on its own. Static buzzed through the silence, sharp and jagged. Then voices broke in, distorted, frantic, spilling into the dark like a plea from somewhere far away. I leaned closer, my fingers fumbling over the dials, heart thudding, as I glanced out the cabin window. The ancient trees surrounding me were bending, their gnarled branches swaying slow and eerie, drawn toward the sound like it was pulling them in. I'm Hryhorij, 39, a forest ranger in the Ivano-Frankivsk region of Ukraine, a solitary figure in this vast, shadowy expanse where the pines tower like sentinels over secrets older than memory. I used to be a radio technician, tinkering with signals and static, until I traded the city for these woods, finding peace in the hum of nature, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl. But this noise was wrong, unnatural, a shiver crawling up my spine that I couldn't shake. It started a few nights back, whispers creeping into my sleep, soft at first, like the wind through the canopy, but growing sharper, more insistent, until they unfurled in my mind like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I'd step outside, flashlight in hand, and see the trees, old as the mountains, wise and weathered, quivering, their leaves trembling with something like anticipation, as if they knew more than I did, as if they were waiting for me to listen. Tried to brush it off, chalk it up to exhaustion or a trick of the mind. Too many nights alone, too many shadows playing games with my head. But the voices on the radio tonight weren't random. They were clear, calling names I knew, names I'd buried deep, my mother's gentle laugh, my childhood friend Bodan's teasing jabs, each one tightening around my heart like a fist, dragging me back to a past I'd fled. The forest had always been my refuge, a place to outrun the grief that clung to me after losing them, my mother to illness, Bodan to a car wreck I should have stopped. But now it felt like a cage, the trees closing in, their branches clawing at the sky, the air heavy with a charge I couldn't name, like the weight of every regret I'd ever carried pressing down on me at once. Something was off, way off. My hands shook as I gripped the radio, the static pulsing like a heartbeat, and I started to see it. This wasn't just noise, it was a signal, a transmission from somewhere else, a bridge between the living and the dead. The forest floor hummed under my boots, alive with a rhythm that matched the cries spilling from the speaker, hollowing me out with every word. I stood there, caught between the cabin's fragile safety and the dark beyond, and it hit me. The trees weren't just bending, they were being pulled, forced by something unseen, something that wanted me in the middle of it. My breath fogged in the chill, and I felt it. A tug, sharp and cold, like the forest was reaching inside me, begging me to step into the void, to be its voice for the restless souls trapped within. The voices grew louder, a chorus of despair. My mother calling my name, Bodan laughing, then screaming. And I couldn't move, rooted to the spot, torn between shutting it off and diving in. How do you silence the dead when they're the ones you loved? How do you turn away from a past that shaped every scar you carry? The air thickened, electric and heavy, buzzing under my skin like a storm about to break. I'd spent years fixing, radios chasing signals through static, but this was beyond me, a puzzle I couldn't solve with tools or logic. The trees swayed harder, their trunks creaking like old bones, and I knew I was at a crossroads, staring into a darkness that stared right back. My mother's voice cut through again. "Hryhorij, please." Soft, pleading, and my knees buckled, a sob clawing up my throat. The forest wasn't just alive. It was awake, feeding on my grief, pulling me toward something I couldn't see but could feel, a force, ancient and hungry, twisting the woods into its puppet. I'd always been the guy who fixed things, radios, broken fences, my own cracked life. But this was bigger, a weight I couldn't lift alone. The static surged, a wall of sound, and I stumbled back, my flashlight beam trembling over the trees, their branches curling like fingers, reaching for me, urging me closer to the edge. The cabin felt small, suffocating, its wooden walls no match for the pull outside. I'd come here to escape, to bury the past in the silence of the Carpathians. But it had found me, clawing its way through the radio, through the trees, through the very air I breathed, and I couldn't outrun it anymore. Night fell hard, the last light bleeding away, and that's when it happened. Something shifted, a crack in the dark that turned everything upside down. The whispers exploded into screams, the trees shuddered, and I felt it. A presence, cold and vast, wrapping around me, pulling me into a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The screams hit like a wave, raw and jagged, crashing through the cabin as the radio flared, its dials spinning on their own, static roaring into a storm of voices that drowned out my thoughts. I stumbled to the table, hands shaking as I grabbed the radio, yanking the plug from the wall, but it didn't stop. The sound kept coming, spilling from the speaker like blood from a wound, filling the room with the dead. Outside, the forest pulsed, the trees bending lower, their branches scraping the cabin roof, a slow, deliberate groan rising from their trunks. My flashlight beam darted through the window, catching their twisted shapes, old pines and oaks, centuries deep, swaying. In a dance that had no wind to guide it, their leaves quivering like they were alive with fear or hunger. Hori. The voice cut through, Andri, my old colleague, sharp and urgent, and I spun, my beam slashing the dark to find him staggering from the trees, his face pale, eyes wide with a mix of terror and grit. He'd been my partner back in the tech days, the only one who'd humored my tales of forest whispers, and now he was here real and breathing in the chaos. Andri, what the hell? I rasped, my voice rough, stepping onto the porch as he stumbled closer, his jacket torn, mud streaking his boots. You hear it too, the radio, the voices. My heart hammered, relief clashing with dread. He wasn't a ghost, not yet, but he looked like he'd seen one. It's not just the radio, he said, his breath fogging fast, his hands gripping my arms like he needed to anchor himself. The forest, it's alive, hori, pulling at me, at you. I felt it on my way. Hear those voices, they're not random, they're calling us. His eyes locked on mine, fierce despite the shake in his voice. This is crazy, I said, shaking my head, clinging to the last threads of reason. They're memories. My mom, Bowden, they can't be real. But even as I spoke, doubt gnawed at me, the voices too clear, too personal, clawing at wounds I'd never let heal. They're real, Andri shot back, stepping closer, his voice low, urgent. I've been digging into the old stories, curses, trapped souls, things we laughed off. They're stuck here, hori, and they need us to set them free. His words hit hard, a truth I didn't want, but couldn't deny, the forest humming in agreement around us. What if we can't? I asked, my voice cracking, fear spiking sharp and cold. What if it takes us instead? My hands clenched, the radio still buzzing faintly in my grip, its dead plug dangling uselessly. A lifeline to a nightmare I couldn't unplug. We face it together, Andri said, his jaw tight, his gaze steady despite the chaos. You're not alone. I'm here, and we owe them this. Your mom, Bowden, they're reaching out. We can't turn away. His resolve steadied me, a rock in the storm, but the weight of it crushed me all the same. The trees groaned louder, their branches clawing at the sky, and the air turned electric, a shiver racing down my spine as the ground trembled beneath us. The voices surged, my mother's plea, Bowden's laugh twisting into a scream, and I staggered, grief and guilt crashing over me, pulling me under. A figure stepped from the shadows, a woman, tall and cloaked, her eyes glinting like stars. In the dark, her presence a jolt of danger and draw. Careful, Rangers, she said, her voice smooth, edged with a smile that didn't reach her gaze. The forest hungers for you, and not all who call want freedom. Who are you? I demanded, my voice shaky, stepping back as she moved. Closer, her cloak brushing the dirt, her aura heavy with secrets. What do you want from us? My flashlight beam trembled over her, catching the glint of her eyes, sharp and knowing. "Lyudmila," she said, her smile widening, a warning wrapped in silk. "I guide those who tread the shadows, but beware, the path is perilous. You'll face more than the dead. You'll face yourselves." Her words sank in, cold and heavy, a promise of a fight I wasn't sure I could win. The forest roared, the voices peaking, and I felt it. The stakes rising, the dark closing in, a journey, starting that would tear me apart to put me back together. Lyudmila's gaze held mine, and I knew this wasn't just about them. It was about me, about us, and the shadows we'd carried too long. The roar shook the cabin, the trees bending low, their branches clawing at the walls as Lyudmila stood. There, her eyes piercing through the dark, pinning me in place. The radio crackled, a storm of static and screams, my mother's voice pleading, Boden's laugh breaking into a wail, and I felt my chest tighten, memories flooding up, raw and unbidden. "Hori," Andri said, his voice cutting through, his hand on my shoulder, grounding me as I swayed. "You okay? You're white as a ghost." His concern was real, but his eyes flicked to Lyudmila, wary, like he sensed the same danger I did, the same pull dragging us deeper. "What if it's not just them?" I rasped, my voice trembling, turning to him as the realization hit. What if it's my dad too, lost here, trapped like the rest? My heart thudded, a cold sweat breaking out. My father, gone one night into these woods, never found, a wound I'd never closed. Andri's face paled, his grip tightening. "Your dad?" he echoed, his voice low, shaken. "The legends, souls, bound by grief, by unfinished business. If he's here, Hori, we've got to face it." His words trembled, but his resolve held. A mirror to my own growing dread. The trees shuddered, their leaves rustling like whispers, and my father's voice broke through. "Hori, help me." Faint but clear, a knife to my gut. "No!" I shouted, staggering back, my hands clawing at my hair. "I can't! He's gone! He's been gone!" Lyudmila stepped closer, her voice calm, cutting through my panic. "The forest is a mirror, Hori. It shows what you hide," she said, her eyes glinting, unyielding. "You can't free them until you face him. Face yourself. Your guilt feeds this place." Her words stung, a truth I couldn't dodge. "We can't run," Andri said, his voice steadying, his hand firm on my arm. "If he's here, we find him. We give him peace. But what if he's part of it, part of the dark?" His question hung heavy, a fear we shared, a line we'd have to cross. The air thickened, the shadows swirling, and I felt my mind fraying. Were these voices real? Or my own guilt screaming back at me? My father's call grew louder, desperate, and I shook, torn between the man I'd loved and the nightmare I'd made of his loss. "Every soul here has a tale," Lyudmila said, her voice dropping, heavy with knowing. "Yours are woven into the roots, yours, Andri's, mine. You'll see more than you want, uncover more than you can bear." Her gaze swept us, a challenge, a warning, a guide into the abyss. I took a breath, the forest pulsing around me, and felt it, the threads. Tying us here, my dad, my mom, Boden, all tangled in this living dark. "We've got to go deeper," I said, my voice low, shaky but firm, a resolve igniting, despite the fear clawing at me. Andri nodded, his jaw tight, his eyes fierce. "Together, we'll figure it out," he said, stepping beside me, his presence a rock I leaned on. Lyudmila watched, her smile faint, and I felt the weight shift, not lighter but shared, a burden split three ways. The trees loomed, their branches curling like claws, and I took a step, the ground humming under my boots, pulling me toward the heart of it all. My father's voice echoed, "Hori!" And I steeled myself, knowing this wasn't just their fight. It was mine, ours, a reckoning long overdue. Lyudmila's voice followed, soft but sharp. "The forest tests those who seek its truth," she said, her cloak brushing the dirt as she moved with us. "Your past is the key. Use it, or it uses you." Her words sank in, A map to the dark ahead, a guide I couldn't refuse. The shadows deepened, the voices swelling, and I felt it, a pull, a call to face what I'd buried, to step into the void and see what waited. "Let's go, Tiame," I said, my voice steady now, a vow to them, to myself, as we plunged into the night, the forest alive and watching. We moved deeper, the trees closing in, their trunks towering like judges over a trial I couldn't escape. The air thick with a damp chill that seeped into my bones. My flashlight beam trembled, cutting through the dark, catching the glint of frost on the leaves, the forest breathing around us, alive with a pulse I couldn't shake. "Stay close," Andrew whispered, his voice tight, his hand brushing my arm as we pushed through the underbrush, his breath fogging fast in the cold. His eyes darted to the shadows, wary, and I felt it too, a weight, a watchfulness, pressing down from every side. "Hori!" My father's voice rang out, sharp and desperate, and I froze, my beam swinging wild to find him, a figure in the dark, cloaked in shadow, his face twisted with pain, his eyes glinting with a sorrow that hit me like a fist. "Dad!" I shouted, stepping forward, my heart in my throat. He recoiled, his form flickering, his voice rasping through the trees. "Help me! I'm trapped!" he cried, anguish pouring from him, and the forest groaned, branches snapping as if echoing. His pain, my chest ached, years of grief crashing over me, raw and unfiltered. "Don't move!" Andrew barked, grabbing my arm, his voice steady despite the shake in his hands. "We can help him, but we've got to be smart. He's caught in something bigger." His eyes met mine, fierce, a promise to hold me together when I felt like breaking. Lyudmila stepped up, her hands glowing faint, her voice firm. "Confront him, Hori. The truth sets him free," she said, her gaze piercing, unyielding. "He's bound by your regret. Face it, or it holds you both." Her words cut deep, a challenge I couldn't back down from. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling, stepping closer despite the fear clawing at me. "Why'd you leave us? Why are you here?" My hands shook, reaching for him, needing answers, needing the dad I'd lost to the night. "I didn't leave," he shouted, his face twisting, pain and rage warring in his eyes. "I was taken, caught in the dark, held here. You've got to see, Hori. It wasn't my choice." His words sank in, heavy and cold, rewriting a story I'd told myself for years. Andrew's voice broke through, low and urgent. "He's tied to this place. We've got to break it," he said, his grip tightening, his eyes scanning the shadows. "But what if he's part of the curse? What if he won't let go?" His question hung, a fear we couldn't ignore. Lyudmila's glow pulsed, her voice steady. "The forest feeds on what you carry, your guilt, your loss," she said, her hands raised, light cutting the dark. "Face it, or it grows stronger. Choose now, Hori." Her eyes glinted, a guide in the storm pushing me forward. "What? Truth?" I demanded, my voice cracking, tears stinging my eyes as I faced him, the man I'd mourned, the shadow I'd feared. "What do I need to see?" My chest heaved, the forest trembling around us, alive with our fight, waiting for my move. My father softened, his eyes meeting mine, a flicker of the dad I'd known breaking through. "You've blamed yourself, let it go," he said, his voice faint, fading. "I'm here because you held me. I forgive you, son." His words hit hard, a balm and a blade, cutting through the guilt I'd carried. The ground shook, the shadows surging, and I felt it, a choice, a moment to end it. "I forgive you too," I said, my voice raw, steadying as I stepped closer, reaching for him, ready to face the dark we'd both been trapped in. The forest roared, the air crackling, and I knew this was it, the edge of everything, where my past and his met, where we'd either break free or fall. My hand brushed his and the light flared, blinding, a storm of truth I couldn't turn back from. The light exploded, a searing glow bursting from where my hand met my father's, swallowing the shadows in a wave that burned my eyes and shook the earth. His form flickered, his face softening, a smile faint but real. Before the glow surged again, the forest screaming as the dark recoiled, clawing at the air like a dying beast. "I'm sorry," I shouted, my voice tearing out, raw with years of guilt and love. The words a flood breaking free. The light pulsed, warm and fierce, and I felt it. His forgiveness, mine, mingling in the air, pushing back the shadows that had held us both too long. My father's eyes glinted, peace breaking. "Through the pain, Raihori," he whispered, his voice fading, his form dissolving into the glow, a weight lifting from my chest as he slipped away, not gone but free. The forest shuddered, branches snapping, the air thick with release and ache. The glow dimmed, and I sank. To my knees, gasping, my hands digging into the dirt as the silence settled. Heavy and real. Andre dropped beside me, his breath ragged, his hand on my back. "You did it. He's gone," he said, his voice rough. Relief and exhaustion warring in his tone. Lyudmila stood over us, her glow fading, her voice low. "You've freed him, but—" "Not all," she said, her eyes glinting, sharp with knowing. "The forest holds more. Your fight's not done." Her words sank in, a chill creeping up my spine, a warning I couldn't ignore. A sharp pain stabbed my chest, and I gasped, clutching at my shirt. Dark tendrils, faint but real, curling under my skin, a mark of the dark I'd touched. "No," I cried, and Andre yanked me back, his eyes wide with panic, his hands shaking as he held me steady. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice breaking, pulling me from the edge as the tendrils pulsed, cold and alive. Lyudmila stepped closer, her hands glowing again, her voice firm. "Focus! Push it out!" she said, her light flaring, guiding me through the haze. I gritted my teeth, my mind flooding with light, my mother's laugh, Bodan's grin, my father's smile, and I pushed, hard, tearing the dark from my chest with a scream that echoed. Through the trees, the tendrils shrieked, dissolving into ash, leaving me hollow, scarred but alive. The forest stilled, the air heavy with silence, and I felt it, an ache, deep and raw, a scar I'd carry forever. "I'm okay," I rasped, my voice faltering, Andre's grip steadying me as I hauled myself up, my legs shaky but holding. Lyudmila's gaze softened, her voice low. "You've quieted it." "For now," she said, her cloak brushing the dirt. "But shadows linger, echoes of what's left. You're marked, Raihori, tied to this place." Her words chilled me, a truth I couldn't escape. A flicker caught my eye. Movement in the trees, a shape watching, waiting, and my gut twisted, dread spiking sharp and cold. "Something's still out there," I said, my voice steady despite the fear, my hand brushing the scar on my chest, a reminder of the fight. Andre stood, his jaw tight, his eyes fierce. "We'll face it, whatever it is," he said, his voice firm, a vow matching mine. "We're not done, not yet." His resolve bolstered me, a fire against the dark creeping back. Lyudmila nodded, her smile faint, tired. "The forest tests. You're past your strength," she said, her eyes glinting with a quiet challenge. "Seek the heart of it, or it seeks you." Her words sank in, a map to the shadows ahead, a guide I couldn't refuse. The trees loomed, whispering, low, and I felt it, a pull, a call to dig deeper, to face what lingered. "Let's go," I said, my voice steady now, hauling my pack up, the weight grounding me as we turned from the clearing, the dark alive and waiting. The clearing faded behind us, the moonlight dimming as the trees closed in, their branches swaying slow and heavy, whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. My chest ached, the scar pulsing faintly, a reminder of the dark I'd torn out, a mark tying me to this place, to the fight still ahead. Andre walked beside me, his steps steady, his breath fogging in the chill. "You sure you're up for this?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes flicking to my chest, worry creasing his brow. "That thing, it got inside you." His concern was real, a thread holding me together. "I have to be," I said, my voice firm despite the tremble in my hands, resolve hardening like steel. "We freed him, but there's more, something watching, waiting." My gaze swept the shadows, catching that flicker again, a shape, a presence lurking just out of reach. Lyudmila trailed us, her cloak brushing. The dirt, her voice cutting through the quiet. "The forest isn't done with you," she said, her eyes glinting sharp and knowing. "You've stirred it, you're past your pain. It's awake now, and it hungers." Her words sank in, cold and heavy, a truth I couldn't dodge. The ground hummed, a low vibration rising through my boots, and I felt it, the pulse of the woods, alive with what we'd unleashed, what we'd left behind. "We need to know what's out there," I said, my mind racing, old tech instincts kicking in. "Track the signal, find the source." Andrew nodded, his jaw tight, his flashlight beam steady. "If it's a curse, a trap, whatever, we'll break it," he said, his voice rough but sure, a spark of fight breaking through the exhaustion. "We've come this far, can't stop now." His resolve mirrored mine, a fire I needed. The trees swayed, their whispers growing, and I caught it. My mother's voice, faint but clear, a thread in the dark. "There's more than my dad here," I said, my voice low, heavy with realization. "They're all tied to this, Mom, Bodan, maybe others." My chest tightened, dread and purpose locking in. Lyudmila's gaze sharpened, her voice soft but firm. "Every soul here is a piece of you, of us," she said, her hands glowing faint, guiding us forward. "You'll face them all, or they'll face you. Choose your fight, Raihori." Her words chilled me, a call I couldn't ignore. Growl rumbled through the trees, low and guttural, and I froze, my beam swinging wild as the shadows thickened, swirling like a storm. "It's coming," I said, my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at me, my hand brushing the scar, a warning pulsing under my skin. Andrew stepped closer, his grip tight on my arm. "We're ready, whatever it is," he said, his eyes fierce. His resolve a rock I leaned on. "We've beaten it once, we'll do it again." His words sank in, a warmth against the cold dread creeping up my spine. The forest loomed, its shadows deep and alive, and I felt it, a pull, a call to face what lingered, to dig into the heart of it all. "Let's move," I said, my voice firm, hauling my pack higher, the weight grounding me against the dark ahead. Lyudmila's voice followed, low and steady. "The heart of the forest waits. Your truth lies there," she said, her eyes glinting with a quiet knowing. "But beware, it takes as much as it gives." Her warning hung heavy, a guide into the abyss, a challenge I'd meet head-on. The shadows surged, a roar breaking the silence, and I felt it, an icy grip, sharp and cold, yanking me back as the dark swallowed me whole. "Raihori!" Andri's shout faded, Lyudmila's face twisting in horror, and I was gone, lost to the void, my fate hanging in the balance. Here's the end of my story, the one I sent in. Everything that went down that night in the Carpathians. Hope it hit you like it hit me, heavy with those shadows. If it did, leave a like, subscribe if you can, comment something. Telling this tore me open, pulling up a past I'd buried deep. I was out on patrol that afternoon, the Daintree rainforest stretching endless around me, when a soft breeze kicked up, tugging at my sleeves and swirling leaves into tight spirals across the forest floor. I stopped, caught by how they traced. Patterns delicate, almost deliberate, like nature sketching its own art. It was beautiful, hypnotic, but when I glanced up at the canopy, something twisted in my gut. The shadows under the trees were shaking, quivering hard like the ground itself was scared stiff, while everything else stood still, calm as a painting. No wind strong enough to explain it, no animals stirring, just those shadows, trembling. Like they knew something I didn't. I'm Lazaro, 34, a forest ranger here in this wild green sprawl of Queensland, Australia. Used to be an artist back in Cairns, brushing landscapes onto canvas. Trees, rivers, the way light dances through leaves. I traded paint for boots years ago, craving the real thing over pictures, and the Daintree's been my home since. Lately, though, it's turned strange. The winds feel alive, purposeful, carving those spirals with intent, and the shadows, they jitter, like they're screaming silent warnings. I've snapped photos trying to catch it, but every shot comes out smeared, a blurry mess mirroring the unease chewing me up inside. It hit me slow, then all at once. The breeze wasn't just air. It was something else, something old, using the leaves to take shape, swirling them into a body I couldn't quite see. And those shadows? Not just tricks of light, they were guards, frantic, yelling at me to run from a threat I couldn't spot. My skin prickled, cold sweat beating down my neck. Whatever was out there, it was hunting me, and I could feel its eyes, unseen, heavy, tracking every step I took. The air thickened fast, the leaf spirals tightening around me, spinning quicker, angrier, like a storm snapping shut. The forest, my refuge, my quiet place, twisted into a trap, branches closing in like a cage. Each gust whispered, low and sharp, secrets I couldn't catch, while the shadows pulsed, urgent, begging me to move. I was stuck, tangled in a riddle, with no way out. The beauty I'd loved turning dark and mean. Old ghosts started creeping up uninvited. My brother Mateo, lost in these woods when we were kids. We'd been thick as thieves, running wild, until one day he slipped into the shadows and never came back. I'd been the big brother, supposed to keep him safe, but I failed, and that guilt's been a weight I've carried ever since. Now it mixed with this new fear, heavy and sour. Were the shadows trembling for me? Was this thing tied to him, to that day I couldn't forget? The trees loomed taller, ancient and knowing, their knotted branches stretching out like they wanted to grab me, or maybe shove me away. Running wasn't an option. I needed to know. The spirals pulled me deeper toward the forest's heart, where answers hid in the blur between what's alive and what's not. My boots sank into the damp earth, each step heavier, like the Daintree itself was daring me to face it. Night crashed down hard, turning the greens to a sea of black and gray, the air thick with a quiet that pressed on my chest. My heart thumped, loud, drowning out the silence, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. The shadows shifted, stretching into shapes, watchers dark and still, waiting for the axe to fall. A rustle snapped me around, breath catching sharp in my throat. A figure stepped from the dark, a cloaked shape, blending into the night like it was born there. The hood hid their face, but their stare cut through, pinning me where I stood. My hand twitched toward my flashlight, instincts screaming. "Lazaro," they said, voice rough and low, scraping the stillness. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't a threat, more a warning, heavy with knowing, and it sent a shiver racing down my back. "Who are you?" I barked, voice steadier than I felt. "What's with the shadows?" My gut churned. This wasn't some lost hiker. This was something else, something that belonged here more than I did. They paused, then dropped the hood, showing a face carved with age. Wild hair, eyes sharp and deep. Mara, the locals called her, a myth whispered. Around campfires, half witch, half guardian, tied to things nobody dared name. "Listen up," she said, stepping closer, her gaze flickering like a flame. "This forest's alive. More than you get. Those shadows, echoes of the lost, restless, clawing to take back what's gone." Her words slammed into me, dragging key. Up Mateo, his laugh, his wide eyes, that empty space he left. "What are you saying? My brother," I started, but she cut me off, sharp but soft. "Not him, not yet. But this dark, it's hooked to your loss, feeds on your fear, your pain." I swallowed hard, her truth sinking deep. Mateo's ghost had dragged me here, and now it was bait. "How do I stop it?" I asked, a desperation leaking out, my voice cracking under the weight. Mara's eyes held mine, steady but heavy. "Face the shadows, Lazaro. Cut the ties to your past, or it'll eat you alive." The air turned icy, the leaf spirals whipping. Back, fast and wild, matching the panic clawing my chest. Shadows writhed, hungry, reaching for me, and Mara's voice dropped low. "Don't let 'em in. They'll twist your head, make you doubt what's real. Trust me, I'll help." Just as a howl ripped through the trees, shaking the night, and I stumbled, fear flooding hot through my veins. We pushed deeper, the dark swallowing us whole, shadows swirling like a storm ready to break. Mara led, a dim light in the black, and I clung to her like a lifeline. My head spun with Matteo, his grin that day he vanished, the guilt I'd painted over with years of running. "Lazaro, stay sharp," Mara snapped, pulling me from the haze. "The shadows are eating your memories, face 'em, or they'll take you." Her voice was a whip cracking through my fog, but doubt gnawed at me. "What if I can't?" I whispered, terror choking me. "What if it's too much?" "You're tougher than that," she said, softer now, eyes glinting. "Truth hurts, but it's your way out. What you buried, it's your strength." Her words steadied me, just as another howl hit, louder, with whispers trailing it, mocking, pulling at my edges. They were talking now, the shadows, taunting. "Me, you failed him, Lazaro." And I shook, cold sweat dripping. "What are they saying?" I asked, voice trembling. Mara's jaw tightened. "Trying to break you, mix truth with lies, sort it out fast." I nodded, but reality slipped. Shadows turned into faces. Matteo's smile, Mom's tears, Dad's clenched fists. "No," I gasped, shaking my head hard. "This isn't real. I won't let it." Then he was there. Matteo, right in front of me, a ghost with hurt in his eyes. "You left me," he said, voice cutting deep. "I looked for you," I yelled, chest tearing open. "Every day I tried." Mara stepped in, fierce. "That's not him. It's your guilt talking. Let it go." But his eyes shifted, dark and sly. "You don't get it, do you? There's more you forgot, stuff we buried." My heart stopped, truth crashing in. "You're not just a memory," I whispered, shaking. "You're part of this." "Yeah?" Ground bucked, shadows exploding into a mess of noise and dark, and Mara yanked me back. "Move! It's waking up!" As I realized this wasn't just about him. It was me too, secrets I'd locked away, tying us all to this place. The shadows roared, a wall of black clawing at us, and I shouted, "You're not real!" Voice raw, fighting the pull. "Or maybe I am," he hissed back, calm and cold. "The truth you've dodged." My head spun, doubt digging in, but Mara's grip tightened. "Choose now, Lazaro. Face it or fall." As the forest shook, daring me to pick, I stood firm, light flaring inside me, hot and bright, shoving the dark back. Shadows screeched, peeling away, and I pushed harder, Mara beside me, her strength fueling mine. "You can't have me," I roared, driving them off, but Matteo's voice lingered. "You'll carry me forever." And the forest stilled, dawn bleeding through, colors waking up slow. He faded, eyes soft but heavy, and I felt it. Freedom, but scarred. The weight of him still there. Mara slumped, pale, worn thin, and I saw it. The fight had hit her hard, too. "We did it," she murmured, but her voice shook, and I caught flickers of shadow still lurking, waiting. Something glinted in the dirt. A locket, Matteo's, cold and heavy when I picked it up. My gut twisted. It was proof the past wasn't gone, just quiet for now. "What's this?" Mara asked, wary, and I shook my head. "Something we missed." As a figure stepped out, cloaked, eyes sharp. "You've only started," she said, smooth and dark. "The forest has layers. You've barely touched them." The sun climbed, warm light spilling over us, but that pull stayed, answers, danger all mixed up. The locket burned in my hand, and Mara's look said it. We weren't done. Shadows whispered at the edges, promising more, and as we moved on, I knew this was just the start. Matteo, me, the Daintree, all tangled in a story still unfolding. That's my tale, what I faced out there in the Daintree. Hope it sticks with you. If it does, leave a like, subscribe, maybe say what hit you. Wasn't easy digging this up, cuts deep reliving it, but it's out now, and I'm glad you heard it through. What if the very ground beneath your feet began to thrum with an alien heartbeat? The thought iced my veins as I stood frozen, staring into the shadowed expanse of Vatnajökull National Park. I'm Einar, a 36-year-old ranger here in Iceland's volcanic wilds, and this is my tale, Scary Horror Stories, Park Ranger Edition. Pulsating lights flickered on the horizon, alive and eerie, drawing me in like moths to a flame. Too strange to be stars, too deliberate for aircraft. The darkness, twisted, shadows dancing like specters against the jagged landscape, their movements hypnotic yet foreboding. My breath fogged in the frigid air, chest tight with a mix of awe and dread as those lights pulsed, a symphony of the unknown echoing across the frozen earth. I've roamed these rugged lands for years, cataloging mosses and birds, but my heart's always belonged to geology, rock formations, magma flows, the raw pulse of the earth beneath my boots. Nights under Iceland's vast sky, tracing volcanic scars, have been my sanctuary. Lately, though, that sanctuary's turned alien. The light started as a distant curiosity, faint glimmers I'd spot from my ranger post. But they've grown into an obsession, flickering in patterns no science could explain, teasing at secrets buried deep. Then came the ground, a warmth seeping up unnatural in the icy chill. I felt it first a week ago, a heat radiating through my soles, defying the frost around me, as if the earth itself had stirred awake. My gear, compasses, thermometers, failed me, spitting erratic nonsense instead of answers. I'd stand there, instruments trembling in my hands, watching the lights sink with a rhythm I could feel in my bones, mocking my need to understand. Deeper into the forest I went, moss crunching underfoot, the air thick with damp earth and a faint sulfur tang. The heat intensified, my boots sizzling against the pulsing ground, soles softening as if kissed by unseen fire. I stumbled back, heart hammering as the lights flared brighter, their beat quickening, a living thing eager to whisper its truths, yet desperate to stay veiled. My mind raced, caught between fascination and a creeping terror I couldn't name. Legends flickered through my thoughts, campfire tales of ancient gods, beings slumbering beneath Iceland's crust, waiting for their moment. I'd always scoffed, my rational mind dismissing them as folklore, but now they gnawed at me, insistent. What if the lights were a call, a signal from something vast and buried, stirring after eons of sleep? The idea chilled me, yet my feet stayed rooted, drawn to the mystery like a tide to the moon. Each step grew heavier, a weight pressing my chest as the forest warped, shadows stretching into grotesque shapes. Watching me, I felt eyes, ancient and unyielding, prickling my skin with every move. The trail wasn't a path anymore, it was a plunge into madness. My heartbeat matched the light's pulse, a primal fear clawing up as I realized I wasn't just witnessing. I was part of it, an intruder in a story not meant for me. The earth thrummed louder, urgent now, and I knew nature wasn't just alive here. It was waking, ready to reclaim what it had guarded for centuries, with me caught in its grip. Night fell, and that's when it shifted. Something so wild, it tore through every certainty I'd clung to, pulling me deeper into the unknowns. Embrace. The sun sank, twilight bleeding into an otherworldly glow as I stood there, heart racing, the light's rhythm syncing with my pulse. A whisper brushed my ears. Einar, soft, insistent, carried on a wind that shouldn't have spoken. I spun, breath catching. Sigrun stood there, my fellow ranger, her fierce blue eyes glinting in the dim light. Small but unyielding, she'd always chased Iceland's ghost stories, her passion a spark I'd envied. You felt it too, she said, breathless, stepping closer, her gaze locked on the lights. Excitement danced with fear in her face, a mirror to my own tangled mess of emotions. Are you sure about this? I asked, voice low, trembling. It's alive, Sigrun. Dangerous, maybe. Legends of slumbering gods flashed again. Had we stumbled into their domain? We can't ignore it, she shot back, fire in her tone. This is huge, Einar, a discovery. We'd be fools to walk away. Her words lit something in me, curiosity clawing past the dread. I nodded, reluctant, but hooked. Okay, but we stay sharp. We don't know what's out here. We moved together into the shadows, an uneasy pack forming, bound by a shared hunger for the truth. The lights flared, bathing the trees in an eerie sheen. I felt the ground breathe, heat surging up, alive under my feet. Sigrun's awe mirrored mine, but fear lingered in her tightening grip. Einar, look, she hissed, pointing. A figure loomed from the dark, tall, and wild-haired, urgency radiating off him. My stomach dropped as I recognized Bjorn, the local historian steeped in Iceland's lore. Bjorn, I called, his name a jolt in the stillness. He'd fueled my love for these lands with his tales. But now he felt like a warning, a shadow of what I might become. You shouldn't be here, he said, voice low and grave. The lights are a signal, the ground's waking. His words sank into me, cold and heavy, chilling my bones. Sigrun stepped up, defiant. Then help us understand. You know the stories. What is this? Her fervor clashed with his caution, tension crackling between them like a storm. Curiosity can destroy, Bjorn warned, eyes narrowing. I've seen it. I've lost people to this. Turn back before it's too late. His voice carried scars, a past I hadn't glimpsed before. The air buzzed, lights pulsing faster. I felt trapped, torn between Sigrun's fire and Bjorn's fear, my own heart thudding with both. The earth urged me on, whispering secrets. I couldn't resist. The ground quaked, violent and sudden. I stumbled, grabbing Sigrun as the lights blazed, blinding us. The heartbeat quickened, darkness closing in, and I knew we'd crossed a line, and there was no retreat. The tremor threw me off balance, boots skidding on the pulsing earth. Sigrun's grip tightened, her excitement souring to unease. Einar? What's happening? She asked, voice shaking. I don't know, I yelled, turning to Bjorn. What did you mean it's waking? My chest heaved, desperate for something solid to cling to. He paused, jaw tight, eyes shadowed with memory. Legends say a power sleeps here, old, aware. It chooses who sees it, and it's ruthless. You're stirring it now. Dread coiled tighter. Was I losing my grip? I'd sought wonders, not this abyss, but the heat, the lights. They felt too real, too close, like a memory I'd forgotten. Bjorn, you're hiding something, Sigrun pressed, voice sharp. You've faced this. Tell us, her demand. Cut through, a plea wrapped in grit. I chased it once, he admitted, voice dropping. Uncovered truths that broke me, friends lost, turned into shells. I barely got out. Pain flickered in his gaze, a warning etched deep. Memories crashed in, my father, wild-eyed, chasing myths till he snapped, leaving me to swear I'd never follow. Yet, for here I was, teetering on his edge, the same pull gnawing at me. Einar! Sigrun's shout yanked me back. She pointed at a swirling vortex, lights merging into a shimmering gate. My heart lurched, drawn to it, a call I couldn't shake. Stay back, Bjorn barked, but his voice faded against the hum. I heard whispers, my name woven in, tugging at my core like a thread, unraveling. My father's ghost loomed in my mind. Had he faced this too? Was this his madness or his truth? The choice loomed, step in or run, leaving it unanswered. The vortex pulsed, shadows shifting. I felt torn, Sigrun's resolve clashing with Bjorn's dread, my past pressed in, a weight I couldn't dodge. Then they came, figures, twisted ethereal, eyes hungry, legends made flesh. The ground's heartbeat roared, and I knew we'd woken it, and it wasn't done with us. Sigrun's gaze met mine, fear and fire mingled. I had to choose, but the shadows closed in, and I felt the past dragging me forward into the dark. The eye. Shadows took shape, smoke-like, their eyes piercing. I stood rooted, heart pounding in sync with the earth's alien beat. Sigrun's hand slipped, her own fear surfacing. Einar, we can't stay, she whispered, voice cracking. This'll swallow us. Her plea tugged at me, but I couldn't move. My father's echo held me, daring me to face it. His madness flashed, wild rants, scribbled maps. Had he stood here too? I wanted to run, but the need to know burned hotter, a fire I couldn't douse. Bjorn, I shouted, voice raw. What do we do? You've been here. Help us. My desperation echoed, a plea for guidance in this chaos. You choose, he said, stepping closer, grim. It offers power but takes. Those shadows are the lost, testing you. They'll break you if you falter. His words cut heavy with truth. The figures loomed, their hunger palpable. I felt the vortex pull, a storm of energy begging me to leap. Retreat meant safety, but ignorance. Forward meant everything or nothing. Einar, I can't lose you. Sigrun's cry pierced me. I saw her fear, my own mirrored. But words stuck, choked by the choice looming like a blade. One shadow lunged, fingers stretching through reality. Join us, it hissed, a chorus of whispers. I jerked back, anger, flaring against the terror. Enough, I roared, defiance surging. I won't be your pawn. My voice shook the air, the vortex flaring as the shadows paused, uncertain. I stepped forward, resolve hardening. Sigrun grabbed me, eyes blazing. Together, Einar, we face it together. Her strength anchored me, a lifeline in the storm. The shadows pressed, intentions veiled. I felt our bond fragile yet fierce, a thread against the dark. This was my stand, our stand, no matter what waited. The vortex hummed, energy crackling. I took a breath, Sigrun at my side, ready to rewrite our fate in the face of this ancient unknown. We moved as one, hearts pounding. The shadows writhed, testing us, but together we'd meet whatever lay beyond, unbroken or unmade. The vortex swallowed us, light and shadow, twisting into chaos. The whispers roared, drowning me as cold gripped my bones, every sense ablaze. Silence crashed in. I blinked, mist swirling around us. Sigrun beside me, her presence a tether. Einar, what happened? She asked, voice steady but thin. I think we crossed it, I said, heart racing. Not just fear, but a wild thrill. The vortex's echo thrummed in me, a mark of what we dared. A shadow drifted forward, eyes glowing, not attacking, just watching. You chose truth, it said, voice layered, heavy, but it costs. Pain stabbed me sharp and deep. I staggered, clutching my side where a dark mark bloomed, a scar of shadow sinking into my flesh. Einar. Sigrun rushed over, pale. What's wrong? Her worry cut through as I gasped, the weight of it sinking in. I was marked, changed. It's part of me now, I rasped, feeling the burden settle. The shadow nodded. You bear us, then faded, leaving whispers in the mist. We've got to go, Sigrun urged, pulling me up. I nodded, pain pulsing, but the mist shifted, alive, with secrets still untold. We stepped back through, reality snapping into place. Bjorn waited, eyes wide. What happened? He demanded, searching my face. We faced it, I said, voice shaky. But it's not done. The mark throbbed, a reminder we'd touched the dark, and it had touched us back. Sigrun's glance held fear and grit. I felt the shift, our scars binding us to this mystery, a thread yet unwoven. The sun dipped, shadows stretching. I felt the call again, my father's truth tangled with mine, a pull to dig deeper into this abyss. The dark wasn't finished, it lingered, promising more, and we'd chase it, marked but unbroken, into whatever came next. The mark burned, a heartbeat in my skin. I felt it spread, shadows, whispering power, hunger, as Sigrun's voice faded to a hum. Weeks blurred. The dark grew, a thirst I couldn't quench, my reflection twisting into something cold, something not me. One night, Sigrun faced me, tears shining. You're slipping, Einar! But my voice wasn't mine, a hollow echo. I'm what I was meant to be, I hissed, shadows coiling tight. I turned, the dark claiming me, not Einar anymore, but its heir, a vessel forged in shadow, pulsing with a new, terrible life. That's my reckoning spilled out. I hope it shook you. If it did, leave a like, subscribe, maybe say something below. It's a heavy thing letting this loose, so I'd be glad to know it hit you where it counts.